Greetings, this is Christine on Gibson County, Indiana, State Coordinator for the Indiana Assembly. We're continuing with Brett Allen Winter's Declaration of 76. United States Constitution, a common lawyer comments clause by clause. All right, let's go ahead and get over here to this. Make sure we've got everything covered this time. All right, so we're going through, last week we went through pages 76 to 81. Here's the YouTube reading of that. Here's the link to purchase Brett Allen Winter's book and study guide. All right, so Section 8, Clause 1. Let me make sure you have a good view. Okay, so we do have a good view again. All right, so the Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. But all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. The power to lay and collect taxes, taking persons' property, and to declare war, sending men to kill or be killed, are Congress's two greatest powers, never to be allowed in the hand of any other. Number 70. Duties are taxes on goods coming into the United States, also called external revenue, border taxes, and customs duties, for which the U.S. Coast Guard customers and Border Patrol are enforcement arms. 71. Excises are taxes on sales. 72. Bottom line, federal tax collection outside Congress's direct control is unconstitutional without authority. Indeed, Congress's present allowing of executive branch bureaucrats to collect taxes violates the common sense of the common law's required separation of powers. From our Constitution stems the three branches: legislative, Congress, executive, president, and judicial courts of the general government, each having separate and distinct powers and duties. By these separations, power is never to be gathered into the hand of a single will, ensuring that government never violates individual rights. Number 76. However, let's see. However, the Internal Revenue Service is said to be an agency of the Treasury Department, thus under the President's control, placing tax collection under command of the President, not, as this clause requires, under the control of Congress. 77. Once Americans learn that our Constitution makes Congress alone responsible for tax collection abuses, voters will throw the entire Congress out of office. All right, number 78. Each branch shirks its sworn duty, points to the other, duping the people, who then shirk their duty as grand jurors and hold culprits punishable for crimes against Americans under the mere stolen banner of tax collection powers. 79. Because congressmen face regular elections, only Congress will stop collection abuses. And if necessary to get reelected, it will end a tax altogether. Number 80, Section 8, Clause 2, to borrow money on the credit of the United States. Number 81, the power of Congress to borrow money on credit of the United States means on the back of the individual American, and thus is unwise, except an immediate threat of national survival, because the borrow of Congress enslaves the individual American to the lender, the bankers. Number 82, history speaks clear. The same banker using debt will readily enslave nations at war with each other. Section 8, Clause 3, to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among several states and with the Indian tribes. Number 84, federal courts have stretched it thin to splitting apart, applying it with such abandon that it is now turned on its head. Government uses it as a license to unlimited power instead of a bar on government power, its real intent. Number 85, indeed, commerce among the several states, i.e., interstate commerce, says the court includes not only movement and transactions across state lines, but also any activity that never moves or extends across a state boundary, but that affects a term or even could affect a term of emotion or even could affect commerce in another state. 86, in short, the general government, all three branches, misuses the Commerce Clause to hamper and even stop interstate commerce instead of to regulate it, i.e. keeping it moving across state lines. Number 87, one must therefore never interpret it to give unlimited power to that government, swallowing the whole purpose of our Constitution. Number 88, the other two branches of government, ignoring our Constitution, enforces Congress's lawlessness. All right, so that was the study guide questions for 76 to 81. So now we'll get into the reading for pages 81 to 89, and then we will do a run through of the questions so you have those to be able to work through over this week. So here let me move things. We want this now to come forward, and we can play this. Greetings, this is Christine on Gibson County, Indiana, and this is continuing with Brent Allen Winter's Declaration of 76, United States Constitution, and we'll go ahead and continue reading with pages 81 to 89. Let's get rid of this so we can have a good view. Okay. Excuse me. Section 8, Clause 4. To establish an uniform rule of naturalization and uniform laws on the subject of bankruptcies throughout the United States. Comment. Here our Constitution empowers Congress to control immigration and to set a standard for immigrants to become citizens that courts are to apply uniformly and never arbitrarily. This clause also gives Congress exclusive power to set bankruptcy laws throughout the United States. The Constitution gives Congress exclusive power over bankruptcy because our Constitution, Article 1, Section 10, bars any of the several state legislatures from doing that which bankruptcy protection requires. Impairing obligation of contract, i.e., canceling the burden of a promisor's debt. To impair contracts is to relieve the men from keeping their promises to pay their debts and obligations. If our Constitution never barred state legislatures from impairing contractual obligations, i.e. debt, they no doubt would favor their own residents, and the free-flowing regularity of American commerce would grind to a halt. Where the state courts cannot enforce promises of contract, prosperity ends. When the government grants protection from creditors under bankruptcy law, it sets aside promises, obligations, debts of otherwise enforceable contracts. Our Constitution's provision for bankruptcy being allowed to a person every 7 years is in principled accord with Scripture's law, canceling all debt every 7 times 7 years, 49 years, and the common law. A government that never offers relief from a slavery of mind and body by ending the debt of the debtor trapped for life is incompatible with the first precepts of Christianity and is a living reproach to the nations of Christendom, carrying them back to the worst ages of paganism. By Justice Joseph Story. In short, says Solomon, the borrower is slave to the lender, and slavery without hope of relief, whether self-inflicted or inflicted by another, flies in the face of both Scripture and our common law. Section 8, Clause 5. To coin money, regulate the value thereof and of foreign coin, and fix the standard of weights and measures. Comment. This clause demands uniform and fixed nationwide standards of weights and measures for commodities, including gold and silver, so that trade will stay regular, that is, free-flowing. It empowers Congress alone to coin money, not print it. Only gold and silver are in view, and to regulate, keep regular, fix its value, never change it. Congress, however, ignores its duty to keep regular our dollar, passing legislation giving private bankers monopoly power to manipulate the dollar while barring audit of their bank. The common law and Constitution, however, forbid such monopolies. All monopolies are against the Great Charter, Magna Carta, because they are against the liberty and freedom of the subject and against the law of the land, Sir Edward Coke. To regulate the value of money means to keep its worth fixed to the steady standard of gold and silver, so that interstate commerce will stay regular, always free-flowing from transaction to transaction, from state to state, from year to year. For the same reason, our Constitution empowers Congress to set the standard for a pound and a ton, a peck and a bushel, and a quart and a gallon, so that all are always confident and never hesitant to buy and sell. Bottom line, prosperity requires free-flowing commerce, which requires that standards of trade stay regular, unchanging. All the confusion and distress in America comes not from defects in the Constitution, nor from want of honor or virtue, as much as from downright ignorance of the nature of coin, credit, and circulation. By John Adams. Congress, however, has handed its non-delegable duty to keep the value of money regular to the chief shareholders of the Federal Reserve Bank, has forbidden by legislation by audits of this bank, and has granted absolute secrecy to the shareholders' affairs. By lawless machinations of interest rates and overprinting of so-called paper money, these bankers, for their profit without fear, erode the worth of our dollar more each year. Moreover, the courts have failed to call Congress to task for breach of its constitutional duty. In order to further confuse these bankers, call their deflating of the dollar's value inflation, giving the false impression that the devaluation of government-sanctioned currency is beyond Congress's constitutional power to control, it is not. The issue which has swept down the centuries and which will have to be fought sooner or later is the people versus the banks. Lord Acton. Any tampering with standards of weights and measures for goods and money is criminal. The Old Testament says just. Weights and measures denote the right relationship between two objects balanced on a set of scales, one of fixed weight, the standard, and the weight of the other to be adjusted to the fixed weight to achieve the balance. Moreover, a balance with chiseled weights, the standard, is the tool of the oppressor. So also is the monopoly banker's power to chisel the worth of the dollar. See Hosea 12:7, where a shekel signifies oppression enabled by tampering with standards of weights and measures in order to steal. The legal term tzedek signifies meeting an unchanging standard of weights or measures. See Jeremiah 22:3. The Federal Reserve ruse, Congress prints dollar bills at taxpayer expense. The Federal Reserve Bank then buys these bills at printing costs. A $100 bill costs the same pennies to print as a $1 bill, with the following privilege: upon loaning out the number of dollars stated on a bill, that bill becomes, by fiat, worth that amount. But further, the Fed can also loan out that amount at least 7 more times at the same time. Thus, for the cost of printing pennies per bill, the Fed gets the number of dollars printed on the bill plus the power to loan out on interest that many dollars times 7. This is a counterfeiting cartel, a crime, according to the next clause. Section 8, Clause 6, to provide for the punishment of counterfeiting the securities and current coin of the United States. Comment. A security is a written promise to pay a debt. Such a written promise is solid evidence securing, making sure the debt, that is, the contract obligation. Certificates promising payment of a certain amount of gold or silver, bonds, negotiable paper called money, checks, and promissory notes, such as banknotes, are securities. This clause, however, applies only to counterfeiting the United States government's written promises to pay debts, the securities of the United States. The clause further empowers Congress to punish the counterfeiter that mints imitation coins, intending that others accept these, believing that the United States government minted them. This clause, however, does not empower Congress to punish non-government coining of non-counterfeit money. To confuse the matter, federal courts have said that a security is anything Congress or a president's bureaucrat says is a security. Accordingly, courts have held everything from chicken coops to promissory notes to be securities. In addition, so-called federal laws on this clause have been open-ended, allowing bureaucrats to adjust definitions to avoid government's promise to pay its debts, while prosecuting any they wish for asking the courts to enforce the government's promise to pay its debts. Our Constitution empowers the general government to punish only 4 crimes. 1, treason. Very first one, treason. 2, counterfeiting the securities and current coin of the United States. Second one, both have been committed. 3, piracies and felonies committed on the high seas. Also committed. And 4, offenses against the law of nations. Also committed. These 4 and no more of these 4 the Constitution defines only treason. Therefore, the powers to punish all other crimes are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. U.S. Constitution Amendment 10. Thus, federal punishing of any crime other than these 4 is unconstitutional. In fact, says James Madison and Thomas Jefferson, federal legislation to punish any other crime is no law. Being unconstitutional, it is void from its beginning. To sum up, this clause empowers Congress to pass laws against counterfeiting the United States securities, written promises to pay debts, and its current coin, not against counterfeiting non-government written promises such as banknotes. Section 8, Clause 7, to establish the post offices and post roads. Comment. This clause only empowers Congress to ensure, in support of the Commerce Clause, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, that the mail flows freely by contracting for the use of post offices and post roads or building them. This clause, however, grants no monopoly to the general government to carry letters for profit, whether by outlawing others from doing so or burdening other letter carriers with regulations. As are all monopolies of trade, the general government's enforced monopoly on letter carrying is against the common law and unconstitutional. Section 8, Clause 8, to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. Comment. This clause protects any authors and inventors, not governments and government-chartered sham persons such as corporations and other facades by legislative decree. Science means simply knowledge. Useful arts means simply technology. Authors gather, write down, and give us knowledge, science. Using such knowledge, inventors build, fashion, and give us technology, useful arts. Most so-called fine art, the common law, excludes from this clause is born, as did the framers' legislation notwithstanding. The framers never meant to protect what is nowadays called fine arts because these are neither science, knowledge, nor useful arts, technology. The framers do mean to encourage useful discoveries. By granting exclusive rights to the printing for sale of hard-gained knowledge and the sale of inventions arising from such knowledge, this clause encourages men to search out, gather, and arrange useful knowledge into useful inventions, which is the progress of science and useful arts. Our Constitution never empowers Congress to protect by copyright the exclusive right of authors and inventors to their writings and discoveries for unreasonably long stretches of time, such as, for example, Congress's act decreeing an author's exclusive right for his lifetime plus 95 years. It does, however, empower Congress to protect by patent an inventor's exclusive right to his technology for a reasonable time, such as, for example, 20 years, as Congress's acts at present do. David Douglas Winters, Clarksville, Tennessee, patent lawyer, provided the principles of the foregoing comment. Section 8, Clause 9, to constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court. Comment. This clause empowers Congress to fashion and empower all federal courts, save the Supreme Court to its liking. Tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court include the United States District, trial courts, and courts of appeal. By this clause, all federal courts except the Supreme Court are mere creatures of Congress. Thus, Congress has rightful power over each and every federal court inferior to the Supreme Court to limit their jurisdiction, to end it, or to abolish it altogether. In 1802, Congress did just that, abolishing 18 of the 35 federal courts with their judgeships. Remember, federal courts can hear only cases arising under this Constitution. Article 3, Section 2, Clause 1. Further, federal courts below the Supreme Court can hear such cases only if Congress allows. By contrast, state courts can hear any case arising under this Constitution, plus all other cases without limit. The state governments have a full control over all cases, civil and criminal, which concern the property, personal rights, and pursuits of their own citizens. Joseph Story. Congress, however, has no authority over the Supreme Court because it all, as also Congress and the presidency, is a creature, direct creation of our Constitution. Indeed, because each of these three branches of government stems from the same constitutional trunk, independent each of the other, we call them co-equal. See this handbook, U.S. Declaration of 1776, 10 and Clause 10 and comment, or Section 10 and comment. To sum up, our Constitution confines federal courts' jurisdiction, as it also does all the federal government, to those matters it lists. Moreover, as co-equal branches, each branch's duty of independent judgment is non-delegable. Each person of each branch is 100% responsible to decide what is constitutional and what is not, and to act accordingly. For example, the common law and Constitution both forbid the President or any member of Congress from allowing the Supreme Court to interpret our Constitution for him. Each public officer who takes an oath to support the Constitution, says Andrew Jackson, swears that he will support it as he understands it, and not as it is understood by others. Section 8, Clause 10. To define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas and offenses against the law of nations. Comment. Congress, rather than the states, has jurisdiction over crimes committed on the high seas for two reasons. First, ships on the high seas concern commerce with foreign nations, and our Constitution empowers Congress to regulate, keep regular, i.e. free-flowing, international commerce. See Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3. Second, according to common law principles, the high seas are not within the police powers of any of the several states. During war, this clause never bars any of the states from defining and punishing piracies and felonies done on the high seas, unless a state's doing so clashes with an act of Congress. In such a case, the contrary state law must yield to Congress's constitutional acts. Section 8, Clauses 11 to 16 in general. Comment. The following clauses 11 to 16 empower Congress to provide for the common defense, as the preamble says, while also restricting Congress's power respecting war. In interpreting and applying our Constitution, one must distinguish the terms provide and promote, according to the preamble. The purpose of our Constitution is to provide for the common defense, but merely to promote the general welfare. Government promotes the general welfare by limiting itself to the powers and processes our Constitution lists. Thus, the President must never wage war without our Constitution's required declaration of war from Congress. However, some presidents seek to provide the general welfare, while merely promoting the common defense. Others allow the President to wage war without Congress's required consent, namely its duly passed declaration of war. The following clauses 11 to 16 tell Congress the process due before waging war, the reasons the United States can wage war, who Congress can call out to wage war, and who is to fund and provide rules to govern our armed forces while waging war. Section 8, Clause 11. To declare war, grant letters of marque and reprisal, and make rules concerning captures on land and water. Comment. By this clause, only Congress can declare war. Undeclared war is lawless, departing not only from our Constitution, but also from our common law tradition of just war. Presidents, nevertheless, engage the United States in wars without Congress's required declaration. In every such case, war is waged without clear goals of conquering and holding certain territory. The Korean War, 1950 to 53, the Vietnam War, 1965 to 75, and the Gulf Wars, 2003 to present. Such wars out to win the hearts and minds of the native people drag on, doomed to fail. In fact, any war not fought to conquer and hold a certain area of land or country is senseless and always for lawless profiteering. Therefore, the foregoing clause bars the President from using our standing Army and Navy to dominate others in lust of using personal power. Letters of marque and reprisal are papers by which Congress grants authority to private skippers or armed vessels to attack enemy shipping and partake in the spoils for profit. This clause further empowers Congress to write into these letters rules concerning captures on land and water, binding holders to the terms of any treaties entered. Though Congress has not issued letters of marque and reprisal in recent times, to do so remains within its power and is now needful because pirates still infest coastal waters and the seas. This clause remains needful today. Piracy still threatens. Now as then, Islamic pirates and rogue nations menace American shipping. During 2010, 39 piracy acts occurred. For example, on 5 November 2010, a Danish warship blew up a private pirate ship. In May 1975, the United States fought the last battle of the Vietnam War, taking back container ship SS Mayaguez, Cambodian pirates having captured her with cargo and crew while she steamed in international sea lanes. See this handbook, U.S. Declaration of 76, Section 28, and comment. In sum, by withholding from the President the power to wage undeclared war, the Constitution follows the common law tradition, limiting the war powers of the kings to the witens, the ruling eldership's consent by its declaration of war. That presidents will do as tyrants and try to wage undeclared war is unavoidable. But that we all allow war to make tyrants of presidents is avoidable by limiting their war powers to Congress's declaration. Further, any president who refuses to await Congress's declaration before waging all-out war, the House or Representatives must impeach and the Senate must try, and if convicted, remove. Greetings, this is Chris. Alright, so that was the reading. We'll go ahead and run through the study guide questions so that you can be able to go back to the reading and answer the questions for next week. Alright, number 89, section 8, clause 4, to establish a uniform rule of blank and uniform laws on the subject of blank throughout the United States. Number 90 here, our Constitution empowers Congress to control immigration and to set a blank for immigrants to become citizens that courts are to apply blank and never arbitrarily. 91. Our Constitution's provision for blank being allowed to a person every 7 years in a principled accord with blank law, canceling all debt every 7 times 7 years, 49 years, and the common law. 92. A government that never offers relief from a blank of mind and body by ending the debt of the debtor trapped for life is incompatible with the first precepts of blank and is a living reproach to the nations of Christendom, carrying them back to the worst ages of paganism. Justice Joseph Story. Number 93, in short, says blank, the borrower is slave to the lender, and blank without hope of relief, whether self-inflicted or inflicted by another, flies in the face of both scriptures and our common law. 94, section 8, clause 5, to coin money, regulate the value thereof and of foreign coin, and fix the standard of blank and blank. 95, it empowers Congress alone to coin money, not blanket. Only gold and silver are in view, and to regulate, keep regular, fix its value, blank, change it. 96. All monopolies are against the Great Charter, Magna Carta, because they are against the blank and blank of the subject and against the law of the land, Sir Edward Coke. Number 97. To regulate the value of money means to keep its worth blank to the blank standard of gold and silver so that interstate commerce will stay regular, always free-flowing from transaction to transaction, from state to state, from year to year. Number 98, bottom line, blank requires free-flowing blank, which requires that standards of trade stay regular, unchanging. Number 99, all the confusion and blank in America comes not from defects in the Constitution, nor from want of honor or virtue, as much as from the downright blank of the nature of coin, credit, and circulation. By John Adams. Number 100, by lawless machinations of blank rates and over blank of so-called paper money, these bankers, for their profit and without fear, erode the worth of our dollar more each year. 101, the issue which has swept down the centuries and which will have to be fought sooner or later is the blank versus the blank, Lord Octon. 102, any tampering with standards of weights and measures for goods and money is criminal. Number 103, Section 8, Clause 6, to blank for the blank of counterfeiting the securities and current coin of the United States. 104, a blank is a written blank to pay a debt. 105, to confuse the matter, blank courts have said that a security is blank Congress or a president's bureaucrat says is a security. 106, in fact, says James Madison and Thomas Jefferson, federal legislation to blank any other crime is no law, being blank. It is void from its beginning. 107, this clause empowers Congress to pass laws against counterfeiting the United States securities, written promises to pay debts, and its current coin, not against counterfeiting blank blank written promises such as banknotes. 108, Section 8, Clause 7, to establish blank offices and post blank. 109, this clause, however, grants no blank to the general government to carry letters for blank, whether by outlawing others from doing so or burdening other letter carriers with regulations. 110, Section 8, Clause 8, to blank the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. 111, this clause protects only authors and inventors, not governments and government-chartered sham persons such as blank and other facades by legislative blank. 112, by granting exclusive rights to the printing for the sale of hard-gained knowledge and sale of inventions and rising from such knowledge, this clause blank men to search out, gather, and arrange useful knowledge into blank inventions, which is the progress of useful arts. 113, it does, however, empower Congress to protect, by blank, an inventor's exclusive right to his technology for a reasonable time, such as, for example, 20 years, as Congress acts at present. 114, Section 8, Clause 9, to blank tribunals and blank to the Supreme Court. 115, tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court include the United States blank, trial courts, and courts of blank. 116, blank, however, has no blank over the Supreme Court because it, as also Congress and the presidency, is a creature, direct creation of our Constitution. 117, Section 8, Clause 10, to define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the blank blank and offenses against the law of nations. 118. Second, according to common law principles, the high seas are not within the blank powers of any of the several blank. 119, Section 8, Clause 11, to declare blank, grant letters of marque and reprisal, and to make rules concerning blank on land and water. 120, such wars out to win the hearts and minds of the blank people drag on blank to fail. 121, therefore the foregoing clause bars the president from using our standing army and navy to blank others in lust of using blank power. 122, letters of marque and reprisal are papers by which Congress grants authority to private skippers of blank vessels to blank enemy shipping and partake in the spoils for profit. 123, in sum, by withholding from the president the power to wage undeclared war, the Constitution follows the common law tradition, limiting the blank blank of kings to the witens, the ruling eldership's consent by its declaration of war. And 124, further, any president who refuses to blank Congress's declaration before waging all-out war, the House of Representatives must blank, and the Senate must try, and if convicted, remove. All right, that was the reading for this week. We went over the questions from last week, study guide questions from last week, went through the reading for this week, and the questions are ready there for you for next week. So just as a reminder, General Assembly and Militia Assembly call are the first and third Mondays at 6 p.m. Central currently at this time. Second and fourth Mondays are the General and Militia Assembly. Militia Assembly is combined with the General and General as it is linked to both. We have special guest for each of these Monday evenings, Joe, Kentucky Postal Area 4 Chief. He's also the PKTF Executive Director for the Peacekeepers at the Federation level. The Indiana Assembly will be teaming up with neighboring Kentucky Assembly, helping to provide support for each other. The Kentucky Assembly currently has a Marshal at Arms for the state, but does not have a state coordinator. The Marshal at Arms has been filling in that gap, but his main role is the Marshal at Arms. So the Indiana Assembly, stepping up with a state coordinator, is helping to support the role for filling some of that need of state coordinator with Kentucky. And then Kentucky offering the Militia at Arms support for the Indiana Assembly. So some things so that we can start as being the first neighboring states joining efforts to be able to build together. And we are within our same postal area 4, which is Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, and Kentucky. All right, so here are the platforms that we're using besides YouTube is Locals, Odyssey, and Rumble. Locals is more so just for some posts here and there as we are building to at least 59 supporting members, and then it can go to an hour. But that's really, Locals is really more for like just a solid video session of someone talking, not so much any kind of engagement aspect. So we'll see how that goes. If you do know of other platforms for live streaming and chat functions, email records@theindianaassembly.org. We can check that out. If you're armored up with your member agreement and background check, support managing the social media aspect for the Assembly, again, connect with records@theindianaassembly.org. Gifts to support the Assembly, and the gift shop as well. All right. I want to thank you all, and we will be on the call for next week. Continuing with Brent Allen Winters' Declaration of 76. Peace and love.